The stars were burning. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of Defense Station Theta and watched another world die. New Haven had been a colony for 15 years. 2 million people called it home. Now it was just fire and ash. The Crithian dreadnoughts hung in orbit like black daggers against the stars, their weapons fired in steady pulses, turning the surface below into molten glass. Jake could see the flashes even from here, hundreds of thousands of miles away. Each flash meant thousands of lives ending. "Captain, we have survivors escaping in transport ships," Lieutenant Karen Brooks said from behind him. Her voice was tight with emotion. "Should we move to intercept and provide cover?" Jake shook his head slowly. "They want us to move. See those cruisers on the flank? The moment we leave our position, they'll cut us off from the station. We'd be destroyed in minutes. So we just watch?" Karen's hands were balled into fists. "So we survive to fight another day." Jake turned away from the window. He couldn't watch anymore. 3 years of this war had taught him that sometimes survival was all you could manage. "Get me a count of how many transports made it out." The answer came back within minutes. 42 ships. Maybe 30,000 people out of 2 million. The Crithians let them go. They always did. They wanted humanity to know what was coming. They wanted the fear to spread. Jake made his way to the command center. The station hummed with activity as officers tracked the Crithian fleet movements. Admiral Ben Carter's face filled the main screen broadcasting from Earth. "Captain Morrison, what's your status?" the Admiral asked. "Station is secure, but New Haven is gone. They're glassing it completely. No survivors on the surface." Jake kept his voice level. "Show no weakness." That was what they taught in the Academy. But the Academy had been before the war, when humans thought they were alone in the galaxy. "Understood. Fall back to Mars orbit. We're consolidating our forces." Admiral Carter's weathered face looked older every time Jake saw him. The war was aging them all. "I need you at the next council meeting. We have something important to discuss." The screen went dark. Jake gave the orders and the station began its slow acceleration toward the inner system. Around him, the crew worked in silence. They all knew what falling back meant. It meant giving up more ground. It meant the enemy was winning. The trip to Mars took 3 days. Jake spent most of it in his quarters reviewing casualty reports and trying not to think about the families he couldn't save. He thought about his own family back on Earth, his sister and her kids, his parents in the Seattle Arcology. At least Earth still stood, for now. When he arrived at the orbital shipyards above Mars, Jake was struck by how much activity there was. Ships moved everywhere. Construction drones worked around the clock and the docks were crowded with military vessels. Something was different here. Something felt urgent. Admiral Carter met him in the conference room along with 5 other high-ranking officers. But the most interesting person in the room was a woman Jake didn't recognize. She wore a commander's uniform but no ship insignia. "Captain Morrison, this is Commander Lisa Hayes," Admiral Carter said. "She's been working on a project that might change this war." Lisa Hayes stepped forward. She was tall with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Captain, what I'm about to show you is classified at the highest level. What we discuss here cannot leave this room," Jake nodded. He'd signed enough security clearances in his career. Lisa activated a holographic display. A ship appeared above the table. It was unlike any vessel Jake had ever seen. Where most warships were built for efficiency and function, this one looked almost predatory. Its hull was black and smooth with strange energy conduits running along its length. At the center was a massive forward-mounted weapon system that seemed to take up a third of the ship's mass. "This is the USS Blackstar," Lisa said. "We've been building it for 2 years in secret. It represents humanity's best chance at survival." "One ship?" Jake couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. "We're losing 50 ships a month to the Crithians. How is one experimental vessel going to change anything?" Admiral Carter leaned forward. "Tell him about the weapon, Commander." Lisa's expression grew intense. "The Blackstar is built around a zero-point energy reactor. We're harnessing quantum fluctuations in space itself to generate power. The main weapon channels that energy into a focused beam that can punch through any known shielding. In tests, it vaporized an asteroid the size of a small moon." Jake studied the hologram. "How many shots can it fire?" "That's the limitation. The reactor needs time to recharge between shots. In combat conditions, maybe 1 shot every 30 minutes. And each shot drains the entire ship's power grid. Life support, shields, engines, everything goes offline for several minutes after firing. So it's a glass cannon. Hits hard but vulnerable. Jake walked around the hologram, examining it from all angles. What's the crew complement? 300. Small by capital ship standards, but the automated systems reduced the need for personnel. Lisa pulled up another display showing the ship's internal layout. We have the best crew in the fleet volunteering for this. Engineers, pilots, tactical officers, people who want to make a difference. Admiral Carter stood up.
Captain Morrison, I'm offering you command of the Blackstar.
I need someone who understands what we're up against. Someone who won't waste this opportunity. Jake looked at the Admiral, then back at the hologram. One ship, one weapon, against an empire that had destroyed hundreds of human worlds. It seemed impossible. But what choice did they have? When do I start? Jake asked. Today. The ship launches in 3 weeks. That's all the time we have. Carter's expression was grim. The Crithians are massing for an assault on the Arcturus colonies. 20 million people. If Arcturus falls, they'll have a clear path to Earth. 3 weeks to learn a new ship, train with a new crew, and prepare to face an enemy that had never lost a battle. Jake felt the weight settle on his shoulders. But he also felt something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The next 3 weeks blurred together. Jake moved into quarters aboard the Blackstar while construction crews finished the final installations. He met his senior officers one by one. Ryan Garcia, the pilot, was young, but had the highest marks in combat flying. Megan Walsh, tactical officer, had written 3 papers on Crithian battle tactics. Chris Palmer, chief engineer, had helped design the zero-point reactor and knew every system on the ship. They were good. They were the best humanity had. But were they good enough? Jake spent hours on the bridge learning every console and every system. The ship felt alive in a way others didn't. When the reactor was running, he could feel a low vibration through the deck. Like a heartbeat. Like the ship was breathing. Commander Lisa Hayes supervised everything personally. She'd lived with this project for 2 years and knew it better than anyone. She showed Jake how the weapon targeting worked.
How the power distribution could be optimized.
How the shields regenerated after each shot. You need to understand, Captain. This ship is our last throw of the dice, Lisa said one evening as they stood in engineering. We've put everything into this. Resources, research, time. If the Blackstar fails, there's no backup plan. No pressure then, Jake said with a dry smile. I'm serious. The Council wanted to build 5 smaller ships with conventional weapons. I convinced them to bet everything on this design. Lisa's hand rested on the reactor housing. Don't make me regret it. Jake looked at the glowing core of the reactor. Energy swirled inside it like a captive star. I'll do everything I can, Commander. That's all I can promise. The day of launch arrived too quickly. The crew assembled on the bridge, each at their station. Jake sat in the command chair and felt its weight. Through the view screen, he could see Mars hanging in space, red and patient. Beyond it, somewhere in the dark, the enemy waited. All systems green, Chris Palmer reported from engineering. Reactor at full power. Navigation ready, Ryan Garcia called out. Course plotted for Arcturus sector. Weapon systems online, Megan Walsh added. All targeting computers functional. Jake took a deep breath. This is Captain Jake Morrison to all hands. Today we take humanity's fight back to the enemy. Today we show them that we will not go quietly into the dark. Today the USS Blackstar enters the war. All stations prepare for departure. The ship shuddered as the docking clamps released. Slowly, smoothly, the Blackstar pulled away from the construction yards. Jake watched the screens as Mars fell behind them. Ahead lay only stars in the long dark between worlds. Take us out, Mr. Garcia. Maximum speed. The stars stretched into lines of light as the Blackstar jumped to faster-than-light travel. Jake gripped the armrests of his chair. 3 weeks of preparation, 300 lives under his command. 1 ship against an empire. The war was about to change. Jake just hoped they would survive to see it. The journey to Arcturus took 5 days. 5 days of drills, simulations, and endless preparation. Jake ran his crew through every scenario he could imagine. Power failures, shield breaches, reactor malfunctions. He pushed them hard because he knew the enemy would push harder. On the 3rd day, they received a distress signal. The mining colonies on the outer rim of the Arcturus system were under attack. The Crithian fleet had arrived early. How many ships? Jake asked, studying the tactical display. Megan Walsh's fingers flew across her console, reading 12 capital ships, twice that many smaller vessels. They're hitting the outer mining stations first. Standard Crithian strategy. Destroy infrastructure before hitting the main colonies. Time to intercept? 4 hours at maximum speed. Jake looked at the numbers. 12 capital ships. The Blackstar had never fired its main weapon in actual combat. All they had were simulations and test data. 4 hours to decide if they were ready to risk everything. Get me Admiral Carter. The communication delay was frustrating but necessary. They were too far from Earth for real-time conversation. When Carter's response came back, his message was simple and direct. Captain Morrison, you have full authorization to engage. Use your best judgment. Earth is counting on you. Carter out. Full authorization. Translation, you're on your own. Good luck. Jake had known it would come to this. The Blackstar was too valuable to risk without good reason, but too necessary to hold back when lives were at stake. All hands, battle stations, Jake announced over the ship-wide intercom. We engage the enemy in 4 hours. This is what we trained for. Stay focused, trust your training, and we'll get through this together. The next 4 hours felt like days. The crew checked and rechecked every system. Chris Palmer practically lived in engineering, making sure the reactor was running at peak efficiency. Ryan Garcia ran flight simulations, practicing the evasive maneuvers they might need. Megan Walsh studied every piece of intelligence they had on Crethean battle tactics. Jake spent the time in his ready room, reviewing the mission parameters. The mining colonies had 40,000 workers, families, people who'd never expected to be on the front lines of an intergalactic war. If he failed here, they would die. If he succeeded, humanity might finally have a chance to hit back. When they dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Arcturus system, the tactical displays lit up with enemy contacts. The Cretheans were spread across 3 mining stations, methodically destroying each one. Captain, the lead station is already gone, Megan reported. The second is taking heavy fire. The third still has shields up but won't last long. Jake made his decision quickly. Ryan, take us toward the second station. Full speed. Megan, I want a targeting solution on the Crethean capital ships as soon as we're in range. The Blackstar accelerated toward the battle. On the view screen, Jake could see the flashes of weapons fire and the glow of dying stations. The Cretheans were so focused on their targets that they didn't notice the new arrival until it was almost too late. Enemy fleet is reacting, Megan announced. 4 cruisers breaking off to intercept us. Let them come. How long until we're in firing range? 2 minutes. Jake watched the tactical display. The 4 Crethean cruisers were moving to cut them off. Standard defensive formation. They thought they were dealing with a conventional human warship. They had no idea what was coming. Chris, reactor status? Reactor at maximum output, Captain. Main weapon charged and ready. Chris's voice came through clear from engineering. Just say the word. The 2 minutes felt like an eternity. The Crethean cruisers opened fire first, their plasma weapons reaching out across the dark. The Blackstar's shields flared as the impacts hit, but they held. Shields at 80%, someone called out. Approaching firing range, Megan said. Her hands hovered over the weapons controls. I have a firing solution. 3 cruisers are aligned. We can take them all with 1 shot. Jake leaned forward in his chair. This was it. The moment that would prove if the Blackstar was humanity's salvation or just an expensive mistake. Fire. The ship shuddered as every bit of power flowed into the main weapon. The lights dimmed, the background hum of systems faded, and for a heartbeat the Blackstar felt dead in space. Then the weapon fired. It wasn't like any weapon Jake had ever seen. There was no missile trail, no plasma bolt, just a beam of pure white energy that lanced across space in an instant. Where it touched the first Crethean cruiser, the ship simply ceased to exist. The beam punched through the hull, vaporized the structure, and kept going. The second cruiser exploded in a flash of light. The third tried to maneuver away, but the beam tracked it perfectly, cutting it in half. 3 ships, gone in 3 seconds. The bridge was silent for a moment. Then Chris Palmer's voice came through, filled with barely contained excitement. Captain, the weapon performed perfectly. Reactor cycling for next charge. We'll need 30 minutes. The 4th Crethean cruiser turned and fled at maximum speed. Jake watched it run on the tactical display. Good. Let them run. Let them tell their commanders what they saw. Megan, what's the rest of the fleet doing? They're pulling back, Captain. All ships breaking off their attack on the stations. Megan's voice held a note of disbelief. They're retreating. Jake stood up from his chair and walked to the view screen. The Crethean fleet was indeed withdrawing, moving away from the stations at high speed. They didn't know what had just happened. All they knew was that 3 of their ships had been destroyed by a weapon they'd never encountered. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the mining stations," Karen Brooks announced. "They're thanking us. The workers are evacuating to the inner colonies. Acknowledge their transmission, Ryan. Maintain position here until all civilian ships are clear, then take us back on patrol." Jake felt the tension beginning to ease from his shoulders. They'd done it. The Blackstar's first combat engagement was a success, but it was just the beginning. Over the next few hours, the crew watched as the Krithian fleet completely withdrew from the Arcturus system. The mining workers escaped to safety. 40,000 lives saved. Jake filed his report with Earth Command and waited for the response. When it came, Admiral Carter's face filled the screen. For the first time in months, the old man was smiling. "Captain Morrison, congratulations. You've just won humanity's first major victory in 3 years. The footage of that weapon firing is already spreading through the fleet. Morale is up across the board. It was one battle, Admiral. They'll adapt. Let them adapt. For the first time, they're afraid of us. That's worth more than you know." Carter's expression turned serious. "But you're right to be cautious. Intelligence suggests the Krithians are pulling back from several forward positions. They think we have multiple ships with this weapon capability. We need to use that fear while we can. What are your orders, sir? Hit them fast and hard. Strike their supply lines, their staging areas, anywhere they're vulnerable. Keep them guessing about where you'll show up next. The Blackstar isn't just a warship, Captain. It's a symbol. Use it." The transmission ended. Jake looked around his bridge at the crew. They'd trained together for 3 weeks, fought together for one battle. Now they had to become something more. They had to become the weapon that would change the war. "Megan, I need you to work with intelligence. Find me targets. Supply depots, fuel stations, anything that will hurt the Krithian war effort." "Already on it, Captain." "Ryan, I want you ready to jump at a moment's notice. We're going to be moving fast." "Understood." "Chris, how's the reactor holding up?" "Better than expected, honestly. The 0-point system is stable. We can keep this pace up for weeks if we need to." Jake nodded. "Then let's get to work." The Blackstar became a phantom over the next 2 weeks. They would jump into a system, destroy key Krithian targets, and jump out before the enemy could respond. A supply depot here, a fuel station there, a repair facility. Each strike was quick and brutal. Each time the main weapon performed flawlessly. The Krithians tried to set traps. They positioned fast response fleets at key locations. But the Blackstar's intelligence network kept them one step ahead. Megan Walsh proved to be brilliant at reading enemy patterns. She could predict where they would be weak and when. Ryan Garcia's flying became legendary. He could jump the ship into a system, hold position just long enough for Megan to target and fire, then jump out before enemy weapons could get a solid lock. The crew started calling his maneuvers Garcia's dance. Chris Palmer pushed the reactor harder with each engagement. He found ways to reduce the recharge time between shots. 30 minutes became 25, then 20. The ship was performing beyond its original specifications, but Jake could see the toll it was taking. The crew was tired. The constant combat left no time for rest. They ate at their stations. They slept in shifts. The ship started to feel cramped, the air recycled one too many times. On the 15th day, they received new orders. A Krithian shipyard had been identified in the Deneb sector. It was producing the dreadnoughts that had glassed so many human worlds. Destroying it would cripple their production capacity. There was one problem. The shipyard was located in a system with a human colony. 10,000 people who'd been cut off by the war. The report came 3 days later. The colony in the Deneb sector had been destroyed. 2,000 civilians killed in retaliation for the shipyard attack. The Krithians had made sure Earth Command knew exactly why they did it. Jake read the casualty list in his quarters. Names, ages, occupations. Anna Martinez, age 7. Peter Sullivan, 42, colony administrator. Helen Park, 29, teacher. 2,000 names. 2,000 lives that ended because of his decision. He'd known it might happen. He'd made the choice anyway. The shipyard would have produced 12 dreadnoughts over the next year. Each dreadnought could glass a planet. The math was cold and clear. 2,000 lives versus potentially millions. But math didn't make it hurt less. There was a knock on his door. "Come in," Jake said without looking up. Megan Walsh entered. She saw the casualty list on his desk and her expression tightened. "Captain, the crew is asking about the colony. Tell them the truth. We destroyed a major enemy shipyard. The Crithians killed civilians in response. We saved more lives than we lost. Is that what you believe, sir?" Jake finally looked up at her. "It's what I have to believe, Lieutenant. Because if I'm wrong, then I'm no better than the enemy we're fighting." Megan was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right call. And so does the rest of the senior staff. It doesn't feel right. War never does." Megan placed a data pad on his desk. "New intelligence. The Crithians are consolidating their fleets. They're scared of the Blackstar. Some of their forward bases are completely abandoned." Jake picked up the data pad and studied it. Megan was right. The enemy was pulling back, concentrating their forces. They were trying to minimize their exposure to the Blackstar's attacks. "They're adapting," Jake said. "Yes, but it's buying us time. Earth's shipyards are producing new vessels every week. The fleet is rebuilding. 6 months ago we were losing. Now we're holding steady, maybe even pushing back." Jake wanted to feel encouraged by that, but all he could think about were those 2,000 names. Over the next month, the Blackstar continued its campaign. They hit supply convoys, destroyed communication arrays, and crippled enemy infrastructure. The Crithians changed their tactics in response. They stopped concentrating their fleets in one place. They spread out, making themselves harder to hit with a single shot. They also started using civilian ships as shields. During an engagement in the Rigel sector, Jake found himself facing a Crithian battle group that had positioned captured human transport vessels around their warships. Hundreds of prisoners aboard those transports. The Crithians knew the Blackstar couldn't fire without killing them. Jake had to withdraw. It was the first time the Blackstar retreated from a fight. "They're learning," Megan said bitterly as they jumped away. "They know our limitations now." "Then we need to change our approach," Jake replied. "Get me Admiral Carter." The conversation with Carter was brief. The Admiral agreed that the Crithians were adapting faster than expected. But he also had good news. Earth's conventional fleet had grown strong enough to begin offensive operations. The Blackstar would no longer fight alone. The combined assault on the Crithian staging areas in the Perseus Arm became the largest human military operation in the war. 20 Earth warships supported by the Blackstar. It was the first time humanity had enough strength to challenge the enemy head-on. The battle lasted 3 days. Human ships engaged the Crithian fleet while the Blackstar jumped in and out of the combat zone, striking key targets. Chris Palmer pushed the reactor to its absolute limits, reducing recharge time to just 15 minutes. The crew worked without sleep, surviving on stimulants and determination. When it was over, humanity controlled the Perseus Arm. 12 Crithian capital ships destroyed. Countless smaller vessels. It was a victory, but it came at a cost. 4 human ships were lost, 600 crew members dead. Jake attended the memorial service via video link. He watched families weep for their lost loved ones. He thought about the 2,000 people from Deneb. He thought about all the choices that had brought them to this point. After the service, Ryan Garcia found him on the bridge. The young pilot looked exhausted but determined. "Captain, the crew wanted me to tell you something," Ryan said. "We know the decisions you're making aren't easy. We know you're carrying the weight of every casualty, but we trust you. We're with you until the end." Jake didn't know what to say. He just nodded. The war was turning. Everyone could feel it. The Crithians were no longer the unstoppable force they'd been a year ago. Human colonies that had been evacuated were being reclaimed. Supply lines were being reestablished. There was talk of peace negotiations, though nothing formal yet. But the Crithian Empire wasn't ready to give up. Their military leadership had been humiliated by a single human warship. They wanted revenge. They wanted the Blackstar destroyed. Intelligence reports started coming in about a massive Crithian fleet assembling in the outer territories. Estimates ranged from 300 to 400 capital ships. The largest concentration of enemy forces ever seen. Admiral Carter called an emergency meeting with Jake and the other fleet commanders. "They're planning something big," Carter said. "Our analysts think it's a trap specifically designed for the Blackstar. They'll use a bait that you can't ignore." "What kind of bait?" Jake asked. "Prisoners, specifically high-value prisoners. Scientists, military officers, people whose capture would hurt us strategically." Carter pulled up a list of names. "We've identified about 50 people they've captured over the last few months. All experts in various fields. All valuable. Jake studied the list. He recognized several names. Amy Chen, who'd helped design the Blackstar's targeting systems. Daniel Wright, a tactical genius who'd trained half the fleet. Patricia Jones, a xenobiologist who understood Crithian culture better than anyone. They'll put these prisoners somewhere obvious, Carter continued. Somewhere the Blackstar will feel obligated to rescue them, and when you arrive, they'll spring the trap. So we don't take the bait, Megan said. Can we afford not to? Jake asked quietly. These people have knowledge that could help the Crithians. If they're interrogated, tortured, it could compromise our entire war effort. Carter nodded grimly. That's why it's a perfect trap. We can't ignore it, but we can't survive it either. Not with the forces they're assembling. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the problem. The Blackstar had become so valuable that the enemy was willing to commit their entire fleet to destroy it. What if we have backup? Ryan suggested. The Blackstar goes in with fleet support. Multiple carriers, support vessels. They just increase their forces to match, Megan countered. This isn't about numbers. They want a decisive engagement. They want to prove the Blackstar can be beaten. Jake thought about the problem from every angle. The Crithians were betting everything on this trap, which meant they were confident it would work. They'd studied the Blackstar's tactics, its limitations, its patterns. They knew how to hurt it. When do we expect them to set this trap? Jake asked. Within 2 weeks, Carter replied. They're moving the prisoners to a location now. We'll have intelligence soon. Then we have 2 weeks to prepare. Jake looked at his crew. We're not backing down from this. Those prisoners need rescue. But we're going in smart. Megan, I need you to think like the enemy. How would you trap the Blackstar? I'd use overwhelming numbers in a confined space. Somewhere you can't maneuver freely. I'd position long-range weapons to hit you during your recharge cycle. And I'd make sure there's no easy escape route. Chris, can we reduce the recharge time even more? The engineer shook his head. We're already pushing the reactor beyond safe limits. Any more and we risk a catastrophic failure. What if we didn't fire at full power? Ryan asked. Would a partial shot recharge faster? Chris considered it. Maybe. A 50% power shot might recharge in 8 to 10 minutes. But it wouldn't have the same penetrating power. You'd need multiple hits to destroy a capital ship. Jake felt an idea forming. What if that's exactly what we need? Multiple smaller shots instead of one big one. We change our tactics completely. They spent the next week running simulations and testing the reactor's response to partial power shots. Chris was right. At 50% power, they could fire 3 times in the span it used to take for one full power shot. The weapon was less devastating but far more flexible. The intelligence on the trap's location finally arrived. A prison facility on a moon in the Cygnus sector. The moon had limited space for maneuvering. Long-range weapon platforms covered all approach vectors, and 400 Crithian ships waited in nearby systems, ready to jump in the moment the Blackstar arrived. It was exactly the kind of trap Megan had predicted. Admiral Carter gave Jake one last chance to back out. Captain, no one would blame you for refusing this mission. The odds are not in your favor. Jake looked at the faces of his crew on the bridge. They'd been through hell together. They'd won battles no one thought they could win. They'd become legends. With respect, Admiral, when have the odds ever been in our favor? Jake allowed himself a small smile. We'll get those prisoners out, and we'll show the Crithians that humanity doesn't back down. Carter saluted. Good luck, Captain. Earth is counting on you. The transmission ended. Jake turned to his crew. You all heard the prison moon looked small and gray against the stars. Jake studied it on the view screen as the Blackstar approached. The facility was built into the moon's surface, with only a few structures visible above ground. Sensors showed the prisoners were being held in underground cells. Reading multiple weapon platforms, Megan announced. 26 confirmed positions. They have complete coverage of the moon's orbit. And the fleet? Jake asked. No contacts yet, but we're detecting unusual energy signatures in the nearby systems. They're there, waiting for us to commit. Jake nodded. He'd expected as much. The Crithians wanted him to start the rescue operation before springing their trap. Once he was fully engaged, they'd jump in with overwhelming force. Chris, reactor status? Running hot but stable, Captain. Ready for partial power shots on your command. Chris's voice held a note of tension. They'd tested the new firing pattern, but this would be the first time using it in combat. Ryan, bring us into high orbit. Stay mobile. The moment those ships start jumping in, I want maximum evasive action. Understood, Captain. The Blackstar moved into position above the prison moon. Jake could see the prisoners on the life sign scanners. 52 signatures, all in the underground facility. They were alive. Now he just had to keep them that way. Megan, target those weapon platforms. Fire at 50% power. Rapid succession, the weapon fired. The beam was thinner than usual. Less dramatic, but it still cut through the first platform like paper. 8 seconds later, the second shot fired. Then a third. Then a fourth. In the space of a minute, 6 weapon platforms were destroyed. It's working, Megan said with satisfaction. Retargeting for next sequence. Then the trap sprang shut. Space tore open around them as Crithian ships began jumping in. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Capital ships, cruisers, destroyers, fighters. The tactical display lit up with so many enemy contacts that it was hard to count them all. 400 plus contacts, someone shouted. They're surrounding us, Ryan called out. Taking evasive action, the Blackstar began to move, dodging and weaving through the growing enemy fleet. The Crithian ships opened fire, plasma bolts and missiles filling the space around them. The shields flared constantly as impacts hit from every direction. Shields at 70%, Karen reported. Megan, keep firing. Target the closest capital ships. Jake's mind raced through options. They were surrounded, outnumbered, and taking heavy fire. But they weren't beaten yet. Chris, how's the reactor holding up? Good so far. The partial power shots are keeping the strain manageable. There was a pause. Captain, we're going to take some hits. I'm routing extra power to structural integrity. The battle became a desperate dance. Ryan flew the Blackstar through the enemy fleet with skill that bordered on miraculous. He used destroyed ships as cover, dove through debris fields, and kept the ship moving so fast that the Crithian targeting computers struggled to get a solid lock. Megan fired constantly. The weapon would charge, fire, then charge again in a matter of seconds. Enemy ships exploded all around them. But there were so many. For every ship they destroyed, 2 more took its position. Shields at 40%. Hull breach on deck 7. Fire in engineering section 2. The reports came in rapidly. The Blackstar was taking damage faster than the crew could repair it. Jake knew they couldn't keep this up forever. They needed a way out. Captain, I'm reading a gap in their formation, Megan said. Northwest quadrant. If we can punch through there, we might make it to jump distance. Ryan, you heard her. Plot a course through that gap. On it. Megan, concentrate all fire on the ships blocking our path. Clear us a corridor. The Blackstar turned toward the gap in the enemy lines. The weapon fired again and again, destroying 3 cruisers in quick succession. Ryan pushed the engines to maximum, racing toward open space. They almost made it. A Crithian dreadnought, bigger than any ship Jake had ever seen, jumped in directly in their path. Its weapons were already charged. Before Ryan could adjust course, it fired. The blast hit the Blackstar's port side. The ship shuddered violently. Alarms screamed. The lights flickered. Direct hit to engineering. Chris's voice came through, strained with pain. Main reactor is damaged. I'm trying to stabilize it. Shields down to 15%. We've lost main engines. The ship was dying. Jake could feel it. They were dead in space, surrounded by hundreds of enemy vessels with a damaged reactor and failing systems. All hands, emergency damage control, Jake shouted. Chris, talk to me.
Can you keep the reactor online?
There was a long pause, too long. Then Chris's voice came back, weaker now. Captain, the containment field is failing. If it collapses completely, the reactor will go critical. We'll have maybe a 5-minute warning. Can you fix it? I'm trying. But there's radiation flooding the compartment. My suit is... It's not holding. Another pause. Captain, I need to be honest with you. I don't think I can fix this and get out in time. Jake's blood went cold. Chris, evacuate that section. That's an order. If I leave, the reactor fails immediately. Ship goes dead and we're sitting ducks. But if I stay, I might be able to keep it running long enough for you to finish the mission and escape. I'm not leaving you behind. You don't have a choice. Sir? Chris's voice was calm now. Accepting. Get those prisoners and get out of here. That's what matters. That's what we came for. Jake wanted to argue. He wanted to order Chris out of that compartment. But he knew the engineer was right. Without the reactor, they had no weapons, no engines, no shields. They would be destroyed in minutes. Understood, Jake said quietly. Make it count, Chris. Always do, Captain. Jake turned to his crew. Some of them were crying. All of them were angry, but they were professionals. They had a job to do. Megan, target that dreadnought. Full power shot. I want it gone. Captain, a full power shot will drain the reactor completely. We won't have power for another shot for 30 minutes. Do it. The weapon charged. It took longer than usual. The damaged reactor struggled to provide enough energy, but slowly, inevitably, the power built up. The beam that fired was the brightest yet. It hit the dreadnought dead center and the massive ship simply disintegrated. The explosion was so powerful that it destroyed 3 nearby cruisers and damaged a dozen more. The gap they'd been trying to reach was suddenly clear. Ryan, auxiliary engines, get us to that moon. We're not leaving without those prisoners. The Blackstar limped toward the prison moon on emergency power. The Crithian fleet was in disarray, reacting to the destruction of their flagship. It gave them just enough time. Preparing to beam up the prisoners, Megan said, locking onto their life signs. Captain, something's wrong. Chris's voice came through. It sounded distant. The containment field is collapsing faster than I thought. You have maybe 3 minutes before the core goes critical. How much time do you need to transport all the prisoners? Jake asked Megan. 4 minutes minimum. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, then made his decision. Chris, shut down the reactor. Right now. Full emergency shutdown. Captain, if I do that, we beam up as many prisoners as we can on battery power, then we jump out. We save who we can save. What about the rest? Megan asked quietly. We can't save everyone, but we can save some. Start with the most valuable targets. The scientists, the officers. Move fast, the reactor shut down. The ship went dark except for emergency lighting. The weapon was offline. The engines were dead. They were running on batteries alone. Megan worked frantically at her console. One by one, prisoners materialized in the transport bay. Amy Chen, Daniel Wright, Patricia Jones. 37 in total before the batteries ran low. That's all we can manage, Megan reported. Jump drive has enough power for 1 emergency jump, but we need to go now. Do it, Jake ordered. Space twisted around them as the Blackstar jumped away. Behind them, the prison moon still held 15 prisoners they couldn't save. The Crithian fleet was reforming, preparing to pursue, but they'd accomplished something. 37 valuable people rescued, 1 dreadnought and dozens of Crithian ships destroyed. The trap had failed to destroy the Blackstar completely. The ship emerged from the jump in an empty system, drifting and powerless. Jake immediately ordered all hands to engineering to help with repairs. When he got there, he found Chris Palmer sitting against the wall, his suit scorched and damaged. The engineer was still alive but badly injured from radiation exposure. We made it, Chris said with a weak smile. Thanks to you, Jake replied. He knelt beside his friend. Medical team is on the way. Tell them not to rush. I'm not going anywhere. Chris coughed. Did we get the prisoners? 37 of them. Good, that's good. Chris closed his eyes. Captain, I need to tell you something. The reactor took more damage than I let on. It'll work, but it won't perform like before. You'll be limited to maybe 1 or 2 full power shots before it needs major repairs. We'll manage. We always do. You better, because humanity needs the Blackstar. They need hope. Chris's breathing was getting more labored. It was an honor serving with you, Captain. The medical team arrived and carefully moved Chris to the medical bay. Jake watched them go, feeling the weight of another life hanging in the balance. The ship was battered. The reactor was damaged. They'd lost one of their best people, but they'd survived the biggest trap the Crithians could set. Chris Palmer died 3 days after the battle. The radiation damage was too extensive. The medical team did everything they could, but some wounds go too deep to heal. Jake was with him at the end. Don't let it be for nothing, Chris whispered. His voice was barely audible. The Blackstar. She's special. Take care of her. I will, Jake promised. Chris smiled one last time. Then he was gone. They held the funeral in the ship's cargo bay. The entire crew attended. Jake spoke about Chris's courage, his brilliance, his sacrifice. But words felt hollow. Another good person dead. Another life spent in this endless war. After the funeral, Jake met with the repair teams at the Mars shipyards. The news was not good. Captain, the reactor took severe damage, the lead engineer explained. She was an older woman named Victoria Scott who'd helped build the Blackstar in the first place. We can repair it, but it will take at least 2 years. Maybe longer. 2 years? Jake felt something sink in his chest. Can we do field repairs? Get it operational faster? Victoria shook her head. The containment systems are completely compromised. The zero-point field generator needs to be rebuilt from scratch. This isn't something you can patch up. The ship is grounded until we finish the work. Jake looked through the window at the Blackstar. The ship floated in the repair dock, scarred and wounded. It had saved so many lives, won so many battles. Now it was just a broken piece of machinery. How long can we keep fighting without the Blackstar? Jake asked Admiral Carter later that day. The old admiral looked tired. He always looked tired these days. Our conventional fleet is strong enough to hold the line, maybe even push back in some sectors. But the Crithians know the Blackstar is out of action. They're already getting bolder. We're seeing increased activity along the border. So we're back to where we started. Not quite. We bought ourselves time. The fleet we've built in the last 6 months is formidable. We're not as helpless as we were. Carter leaned forward. But I won't lie to you, Captain. Losing the Blackstar hurts. It hurts our capabilities and it hurts morale. Over the next month, Jake watched the war news from his temporary quarters on Mars. The Crithians were testing humanity's defenses. Small raids at first, then larger attacks. They were probing for weakness. Earth's fleet fought back hard. They won some battles, lost others. Without the Blackstar's overwhelming firepower, every engagement was costly. Ships were lost. Crews died. The casualty list grew longer each week. Jake felt useless. His crew had been reassigned to other vessels. Ryan Garcia was flying combat missions on a carrier. Megan Walsh was working with Fleet Tactical Command. Everyone was doing something except him. He was just waiting for a ship that wouldn't be ready for years. Then the intelligence reports started coming in about a massive Crithian fleet assembling in the outer systems. The biggest fleet anyone had ever seen. Thousands of ships. They were preparing for one final assault. Target: Earth. Admiral Carter called an emergency meeting of all senior commanders. Jake attended via video link from Mars. We're looking at a doomsday scenario, Carter said bluntly. The Crithian Empire is throwing everything at us. Every ship, every resource. They want to end this war with one decisive blow. Can we stop them? Someone asked. Our projections say no, we can hurt them. But we can't destroy a fleet that size. Not without the Blackstar. Carter looked directly at Jake through the screen. Which brings me to you, Captain. I need to ask you a difficult question. Is there any way at all to get the Blackstar combat ready? Jake thought about Victoria's assessment. 2 years minimum. The reactor was torn apart. But he thought about something Chris had said in his final moments. About the reactor taking more damage than he'd let on. About how it could still work, just not for long. Let me talk to the engineering team, Jake said slowly. There might be something we can do. He spent the next 12 hours in the repair docks with Victoria and her team. They went over every system, every component. The reactor was damaged, yes, but the core was still intact. The containment field generators could be jury-rigged. It wouldn't be safe. It wouldn't last long, but it might work for one more fight. If we bring the reactor online with temporary repairs, how long would it last? Jake asked. Victoria did the calculations. Maybe an hour. Probably less. And there's a good chance it would go critical. We're talking about a catastrophic failure that would destroy the ship and everything near it. How near? Depends on how much power is in the system when it fails. Could be anywhere from a few miles to... Well, theoretically, if the reactor was at maximum capacity and the containment completely failed, the explosion could be enormous. Jake felt an idea forming. A terrible, desperate idea. What if we overloaded the reactor deliberately? Pushed it beyond any safe limits? Victoria stared at him. Captain, that would create an explosion unlike anything we've ever seen. The zero-point energy would tear space apart. It would be like a miniature supernova. Could we control when it happened? Set it to go off at a specific time? Probably. But why would you want to? Victoria stopped. Her eyes widened as she realized what Jake was suggesting. No, absolutely not. You're talking about turning the Blackstar into a bomb. I'm talking about saving Earth. They argued for hours. Victoria said it was suicide. Jake said it was necessary. Eventually, she agreed to run simulations. The results were clear. If they brought the reactor online, overloaded it completely and detonated it in the middle of the Crithian fleet, the explosion would be devastating. Thousands of ships destroyed in an instant, but the Blackstar and everyone on it would be vaporized. Jake presented the plan to Admiral Carter. You're talking about a suicide mission. Carter said flatly. I'm talking about saving billions of lives. That Krithian fleet reaches Earth, it's over. Humanity ends. But if we can destroy that fleet, we need the Blackstar for the future. After this war ends, we'll need it to keep the peace. There won't be a future if Earth falls. Jake's voice was firm. This is what the Blackstar was built for, Admiral. To give humanity a chance. This is that chance. Carter was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. If I authorize this, I need you to understand something. No one is ordering you to do this. This has to be voluntary. The crew has to choose. No, they'll choose, Jake said with certainty. He was right. When Jake presented the plan to his original crew, every single person volunteered. Ryan Garcia, Megan Walsh, Karen Brooks. Even crew members who'd been reassigned to other ships requested transfers back to the Blackstar. Word spread through the fleet. The Blackstar was flying one more mission. A final mission. 300 volunteers assembled on the ship. Some were original crew. Others were veterans who'd heard about the Blackstar's legend and wanted to be part of it. All of them knew they wouldn't come back. Victoria and her team worked around the clock to make the ship spaceworthy. It wouldn't be pretty. It wouldn't be at full capacity. But it would fly, and the weapon would fire one last time. The day before launch, Jake walked through the ship. He saw crew members writing letters to their families, saying goodbyes over video calls, making peace with what was coming. Kyle Stevens, the young engineer who'd replaced Chris Palmer, found Jake in engineering. Captain, I've been thinking. Chris gave everything to keep this ship running. Feels right that we're going out like this. Feels like we're finishing what he started. He'd be proud of you, Jake said. He'd be proud of all of us. The Krithian fleet was detected 3 days out from Earth. 5,000 ships. Enough firepower to glass every planet in the solar system twice over. Earth's defense fleet moved to intercept, but everyone knew it wouldn't be enough. The USS Blackstar launched from Mars for the final time. The ship felt different now. Lighter somehow. Like it knew what was coming and had made peace with it. All systems operational, Kyle reported from engineering. Reactor is holding steady. We've got maybe 90 minutes before it starts to destabilize. More than enough time, Jake said. He looked around the bridge at his crew. These people who'd chosen to die with him. Thank you. All of you. For everything. Wouldn't be anywhere else, Captain, Ryan said with a grin. The Blackstar jumped toward the incoming Krithian fleet. Earth's defense forces saw them go and understood what was happening. Admiral Carter sent one final transmission. Captain Morrison, it has been an honor. Humanity will remember what you're doing today. Every person on Earth owes you their lives. Just make sure those lives count for something, Admiral. Build a better future. That's all we ask. The transmission ended. The Blackstar approached the Krithian fleet. 5,000 ships spread across space like a dark cloud. They detected the lone human vessel and probably laughed. One damaged ship against their entire armada. It was suicide. They were right, but not in the way they thought. Take us into the center of their formation, Jake ordered. I want to be surrounded. Ryan flew the ship deep into the enemy fleet. Krithian vessels moved to engage, but they were arrogant. They thought they had plenty of time to destroy one crippled warship. We're in position, Ryan announced, right in the middle of their command ships. I count 30 dreadnoughts within 5 miles. Perfect. Jake stood up from his command chair. Kyle, begin the overload sequence. Route all power to the reactor. Everything we have understood, Captain. Overload sequence initiated. Containment failure in...